Orthodox world could do a lot better job of engaging the congregants and asking difficult questions. I would love to see this Shabbat on Pico Robertson, having lots of modern Orthodox rabbis deal with the very, very difficult questions of this parasha. I think Judaism ultimately asks you not to leave. Never give in to the nuclear option, which is you look at something that is abhorrent,
right,
and that you say, I cannot be part of this religion because this is too ugly, and I cannot accept to have the holiest Jew ask for what he asked for in this parsha, whether he thinks it's from God or not. There is no religion that I can be part of that can ask that. Judaism asks you to never declare the nuclear option, to always stay. Once you stay under the tent, then the challenge becomes to understand it. Now this scholar has an explanation. And here's what he says, because he sort of tackles it head on. And he...
I studied his commentary too, Richard Friedman. He wrote a commentary on the Torah in addition to his book, Who Wrote the Bible. But while you're looking for it, tell me when you found it. But Judaism's a very hardball religion. It's not a romantic, airy-fairy, otherworldly religion. It's very much rooted in this world. And this world presents us with many moral dilemmas, such as, for instance, dropping the nuclear weapon on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that ended World War II, killed 150,000 Japanese, but it ended the Second World War and prevented millions of other deaths. So here, the Israelites and God and Moses are trying to create a holy monotheistic people in a particular land. And to do that, they have to get rid of the idolaters and those who sacrifice their children, get rid of them out of the land so that a holy and monotheistic community can begin.
That's right. There was a real... They made a distinction between ethical crimes and ritual crimes. And this is what he says here. He says, the extraordinary severity of the command to kill all males, even infants, and all females who've had sexual relations with men is due to the fact that this is about a ritual crime. The plague is the indication of this. Plague is a divine response to ritual crimes, such as trespassing on the holy and the events of the Korach rebellion and its aftermath. The harshness of treatment for ritual crimes, including the execution of persons who had no evil intent, including babies in this case, has been one of the hardest elements of the Torah for people to comprehend in the past 2 millennia. Since the destruction of the last temple, we have lost the feeling for holy zones and sacred boundaries. Whether we are better off or worse, the fact remains that we are mystified and horrified by the seeming barbarism of a massacre of women and children that Moses commands here. He makes a crucial distinction between ritual and ethical offenses. And this might be a blessing in disguise for the fact that we don't have the temple anymore. Because at that time, there was such an emphasis on the holiness of the space, which created what's called ritual crimes, which sort of contaminates the people. And that's what created these radical measures. There was such an obsession with the sanctity of space. So it wasn't the sex that they had with the Midianites. It was the idol worship. So these things were all connected to the fact that we had a temple that required so many aspects of sanctity. And the minute you violated sanctity, there was a plague on you. There was a contamination, what he calls a ritual crime. This is way, way beyond an ethical crime of stealing or murdering or that. So in the biblical era, it created radical measures that we cannot fathom today. So I think maybe the blessing was when we became the people of the book. And, spend several centuries sort of taking a look at that and saying, well, that's not something we could abide by,
So you don't want to see a rebuilding of the third temple and the restoration of the sacrifices?
Not if it takes us back to biblical commands of such of such purity. I think
I mean, it's not going to take us back to genocide. We're not going to, like, if we rebuild the third temple, there's nothing in Judaism that says we have to repeat and keep going. This was a one-time command to purify the land.
Right. But it creates a sort of a radical mindset that becomes very divisive and unforgiving, and I think it brings out the worst in human nature.
I mean, you're talking about Ashkenazi Jewry now, even without the temple. The Ashkenazi Jewry is very schismatic, very divisive, and very set against each other. Like, we've divided up into Reconstructionist, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Secular.
I think the red lines have changed. I think in biblical times, the red lines were connected to sanctity. And I think in 2,000 years later, we got rabbinic red lines. And the rabbinic red lines are more connected to human behavior. I see that as progress, as evolution. We lose some of the holiness in our lives, but we replace red lines with others. Whether God wanted it this way, I can't say. But the red lines are different now than they were when they were in the Bible. And that's a source of pride for me, being a Jew. But I'm glad we don't have the old red lines from 2,000 years ago.
Have you ever studied Jacob Milgram, his commentary on Leviticus? It's very interesting. So you're talking about the sacrificial system. This is what he says in the Anchor Bible commentary on Leviticus. This is just the first 16 chapters. He wrote 1,000 pages here on the first 16 chapters. He makes the point, theology is what Leviticus is all about, and he means the sacrificial system. It pervades every chapter and almost every verse, but it's not expressed in pronouncements, it's expressed in rituals. Every act, every movement, every gesticulation is pregnant with meaning. So at their deepest level, these rituals reveal values which are sociological facts. So in the ancient pagan world, there was the idea that the deities are dependent upon a meta-divine realm which spawns a multitude of malevolent and benevolent entities, that if human beings can tap into this realm, then they can acquire the magical power to coerce the gods to do what they want. So the priestly theology, the theology of the sacrificial system that we're just talking about, it instead posits the existence of one supreme God. It doesn't contend with any higher realm, nor with competing deities. There is no world of demons. There is no struggle with autonomous foes, because there are none. With the demise of the demons, only one creature remains with demonic power, the human being. Endowed with free will, his power is greater than any attributed to him by pagan society. Not only can he defy God, but he can drive God out of his sanctuary. In this respect, humans have replaced the demons. So the sacrificial system is a way of maintaining the holiness of the community and keeping God within the community. So it posits that if we make dirty, if we depurify our community, God will eventually leave, and if God leaves, we're stuck. We're in a very bad way. Human beings can drive God out of the sanctuary by polluting it with their moral and ritual sins. All that the priest can do is periodically purge the sanctuary of its impurities and influence the people to atone for their wrongs. So I asked Monica when we were doing this Torah talk, would you sin less if every time you sin you had to see a cute animal die for your sins? Mm-hmm. Like in the sacrificial system, you got to bring an animal to atone for your sins. And I think that this would be a much more visceral reminder of the power of sin, and a much more cathartic way to get rid of it than what we have available to us today.
But you look at the success of Chabad and what the Lubavitcher Rebbe brought, to the Jewish world, mm-hmm. and they saw the godliness in every Jew. Mm-hmm. Instead of seeing a sinning Jew as a source of contamination to their world of purity, for some reason, their thinking evolved into saying, this Jew who sins has what they call the Pintel Yid. Mm-hmm. If he's created in the image of God, then there's something holy in him just from the fact that he's a Jew.
Yeah.
So you sort of embrace that. I think that's sort of an evolution.